Louisville Police Department is facing pressure right now because Mayor Garland has spoken out against them, to his credit. This is in regards to an investigation into the department following the death of Breonna Taylor. Let's have a look at the Young Turks discussing this recently with a new host joining John Idarola, who I'm not familiar with. So I'm excited to see if they are good. It's the Young Turks, so usually they are. Let's find out.
Some officers have demonstrated disrespect for the people they are sworn to protect. Some have videotaped themselves throwing drinks at pedestrians from their cars, insulted people with disabilities, and called black people monkeys, animal, and boy. This conduct is unacceptable.
As, of course, Merrick Garland announcing the DOJ releasing a 90-page report summarizing what they've found in their multi-year investigation into Louisville police that was launched in the wake of the tragic killing of Breonna Taylor back in March of 2020. And what they found, as you can already tell from that video, is absolutely devastating. The broad conclusions are incredibly worrying. Some of the specific things that they've uncovered are horrifying. It was pervasive. There were individually horrific acts, and there was a tolerance for discrimination, bias in how policing was done, brutality, insults, racial slurs. Pretty much everything you would not want to see in law enforcement was on offer daily with the Louisville police. And we're gonna jump into some of the most individually horrific acts of brutality that you might not already be familiar with. We're gonna turn to that in just a bit. But Sharon, I wanted to start off with you. What do you make of what they found in this investigation of Louisville?
It's sick, dogs biting people after they've already been subdued. The Attorney General mentioned some of the other things. I will say this, I applaud and appreciate that the system is going to be held, in quotes, accountable here. But I do think the individuals who conduct and persecute and harm people also. We really did not see that with Breonna Taylor. It's slap on the wrist, so minimal, some receiving awards and praise. And so when the Attorney General says the word disrespect, I shouldn't be coming after him when there's so many other people to come after, but I do.
I want to jump in to say I understand that exact frustration. It's really difficult when there is so much wrong to address people who aren't sufficiently helping. If you can imagine that there's a fire burning and it's burning down a house next door to you, and the fire department shows up and they've got like little plastic buckets like a kid would make a sandcastle with. That's what they've got. And they're full of water and they're sloshing it on the house. And then they run out of water and the fire is not dealt with. And so they go to fill up from a hose, like a house hose, those buckets again. That's what it feels like watching, the federal level Justice Department say, we disapprove of these racist cops. Can you imagine being a black person and hearing that reaction to what is essentially a town run by thugs, organized crime? I mean, if assaulting innocent people is a crime, and they are a group which does it regularly and collects a paycheck for this behavior, folks, that's organized crime. And there's a stern talking to. It's not sufficient. On the other hand, I can't believe it's a breath of fresh air because it used to be that the fire department never even showed up to your neighbor's house. So, I mean, it feels impossible. The good news is it's not. We have learned, particularly over the last decade, that public pressure has a huge impact on this. And so much of the depressing behavior that goes on within our government does so simply because these people are operating off the belief that nobody's watching it. So, a little hint as to what you can do. Make sure they know you see them.
It's beyond disrespect. And we need to call it what it is. It is looking at some as subhuman. Although I don't know that animals would be treated the way the police treat some people who happen to be black and brown, disabled, you mentioned. So I have mixed feelings. I want, John, the system held accountable, but I want to see the mugshots and the perp walks. And in this case, I am for more policing of them.
Yeah, I think hopefully for most people, we're way beyond anybody like buying this few bad apples thing or whatever.
Thank you.
But often, like we have this investigation. So I have some mixed feelings. I don't know if they're the exact same as yours, but it's like, oh, good. So now we have an administration that will actually launch these sorts of investigations. Under Trump, this would be either quashed or like stopped in its infancy. They weren't interested for 4 years in looking into these sorts of abuses. But then like you have the investigation. Okay, good. That's good. And they found a lot of this stuff, which is absolutely awful. And like now I'm wondering, so good, they'll get rid of some of those cops and who will replace them? And that's Louisville.
And what will happen to those cops? What will happen to the ones that get fired, but they didn't outright commit a crime? What if we find out some of those cops use the N-word and they get fired for that? It's not a crime to use the N-word. It's just despicable. There is no federal database for corrupt cops. There ought to be. Any American should be able to call on the police with confidence. We don't live in that America right now. The way to change that is a federal database of corrupt cops. If you get fired as a cop, every department around the country should be able to enter your name and social security number when you fill out an employment application and see, no. This person got canned, and we can't, for being a straight up racist. That means any black people who are in our town that have a crime committed against them won't be able to trust us. And we can't deny that we know this about this cop. We can't later say, oh, we got all these complaints, 15 years of complaints from black citizens, and we had no idea that he came to our department from Mississippi in the 50s, essentially. Federal database. That's a major change we have to get done.
One individual spot. Just yesterday on the Young Turks, we were talking about some of the new reporting on gangs in the LA Sheriff's Office. And it's just like every place across all of these states, across literally decades. It is like the word systemic is too small at a certain point. Like the size of the issue that we face, the difficulty in even trying to conceive of how you would reform something that is so fundamentally rotten at every single level, going back since before we were born. It's like even when we get the results of an investigation like this, it's like pretty disheartening.
Yeah, it is, and it's partnering with your abuser. These consent decree. Oh, we're going into business with the very people who couldn't get it right deliberately in the first place. Why not sign a presidential order that takes away any of their money? They're getting federal dollars. Take away their money. Replace them with, if you must, something that has more oversight from the administration. And some would say, oh, well, this is a takeover. It's not really. It's not really.
That's an excellent idea, by the way. That is an excellent idea. Absolutely take away their money, their federal dollars, because they have proven that that is not a good way to spend that money. It's that simple. That money is going to fund a criminal organization, at the very least, a racist organization, an organization that permits systematic racism. That means don't fund that system. That's, to me, a layup.
I think that the people who live there should understand that there could be a sea change, an administration change. And like you said, just like the one before, here we go again. It's the system itself that is designed to attack those who are most vulnerable.
Yeah, and you also wonder, so they'll identify the people that did these individual things. And in a moment, we're gonna launch into one or two of them. And then who will remain? Like one would hope, well, the good cops, I guess, or people who, maybe they'll lose some of their coworkers that they have experience with, but they take pride in being cops, so they want the police to be the best that they can be. No, that's not what it is. Like they leave behind people who are incredibly resentful of how rude it was that you would look into their behavior, people who want this stuff to continue. They may not pop up in this reporting or whatever, but they don't have an actual problem with it. And this is why even when we fight so hard to move the population and the population to get the right sorts of population or politicians elected to, for instance, launch new gun regulations or something like that, some sort of gun control. And then the police in multiple states are just like, no, we're not gonna do that. And who is the oversight body on that? Maybe Merrick Garland launches an investigation that 3 years later is like, well, it turns out that they were refusing to do what they were constitutionally bound to do. Great, that's awesome. And so again, it just gets to.
In other words, there's no consequences. It's the same thing we see time and time again, particularly with right-wing corruption. Of course, they don't act ethically because they have never existed in a system where there is a punishment for that. In fact, they seem to take it for granted. I don't know why they wouldn't. That this is how they're supposed to act. When people talk about how cops come from the American police department, the American police system comes from slave patrols, this is what they're alluding to. It has been systematic, and if we don't make consequences for that sort of behavior, there is nothing that will stop it from continuing.
The last person to give you a solution to this problem, I have no idea. But it is just such a deep problem, and it is not just about police training or particular outcomes of when they go out there. It's the culture of policing, it's the training, it's the police unions, it's the politicians who are protecting them, the relationships that they have with with prosecutors and all that. It's just such a deep foundational issue.
Yeah, and it's like, we just saw it in the Nichols case, right? You had a black police chief who surely had direct communication with a mayor about bringing crime down. And I'll close my eyes and put blinders on to the way in which you do it. And a man who was just trying to get a few feet to his mother's house is beaten to death. So, and you know who else is left behind, John? Who's left behind are the people who look the other way. You want to talk about, just a few bad apples. What about, you have to win the hearts and minds. That's like on any job. You have most of the people in the middle, then some real leadership, and then you have people over here who mean no good. There's a war for who's gonna win the room. And it's like that in police departments and cities. And so there's gotta be a greater initiative, a greater way to use perhaps people and how they perform and what they believe and change hearts and minds. Now, you said it's a heavy lift to reform police. I don't know how you do that, okay? I don't know how you win hearts and minds of people who have privilege and who have always gotten away with it or who look the other way. But that's what needs to be done here. They're not gonna take them by force.
So there's a number of things we can do here. Let's talk about the immediate, the medium term, and the long term. What you can do immediately is contact your representative with the link provided in the description and demand a federal database of corrupt cops. This will prevent the sorts of people that get fired for being racist scumbags that should have never been given a badge in the first place. It will prevent them from being able to wander on over to the next department and do their same despicable, corrupt policing. This will also incentivize decent cops. If you will have spent, for example, 25 years on the same police force, guess what that is going to mean about you? You did in these days. It'll mean that your community possibly trusts you. But if you just say, I've been a cop for 25 years, there's a whole segment of our population which will be like, where were you a cop? Was it always here? Have they been moving you around like a Catholic priest? Federal database of corrupt cops. That is the short-term solution. Medium-term solution. March with Black Lives Matter. Sign up for their mailing list so you can get notified. Join the Black Lives chapter in your state so you know when there is a march in your area that you can realistically join. When, not if. But just like school shootings in this country, because we have not solved the structural problems, when the next American is killed unjustly by the police, march with Black Lives Matter. Long term, vote as left as you can. Vote for policy that will give an economic voice to the black community. Sign up, in my opinion, for the Democratic Socialists of America. Consider donating to them if you don't want to outright join the group. In America, we can use its own corruption against it. And if black people economically are doing better, we can use the fact that it is harder in America to abuse the rich or even the middle class than it is for them, for the American system to abuse the poor. As many black people as we can lift out of poverty, as we can, that will be, this is poorly phrased, if we can lift as many black people as we can out of poverty, that will be a group that we can worry about less. Not at all, but less. It will be a layer of insulation, I suppose, against this hatred. And hopefully, you get enough black folks intermingling in the suburbs. We keep the internet being a relatively free place. People see more black faces, not so strange to them. Hopefully, the hate will die with familiarity.